I'd like to call the meeting to order. Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to begin with a moment of silence, please. Start roll call with Commissioner Stevens.
Here.
Commissioner Smith is present. Commissioner Shimke.
Here.
Commissioner Culverson by phone.
Here.
Commissioner Cause by phone.
Here.
All commissioners are present in some form. Do we have any public comment today? Has anyone came for public or registered for public comment?
I don't believe we had anybody register for public comment.
Okay. Then we'll move on to administrative business. Or any administrative business at this time?
I do have one item, Commissioners. Previously, we had applicant Cobb Valley Sand for the Lenape gravel quarry that had been tabled and then was rescheduled, and then due to the coronavirus pandemic, we had to table it again. They have submitted a request to be put back on the agenda for the board's consideration on June 24th. Previously, we had discussed giving a 30-day notice. That would not allow us the proper time for 30-day notice. So if the board wanted to consider putting it back on the agenda at this time, I would recommend that we go to July 8th, or excuse me, yeah, July 8th. Yep, that would be the day, in order to get the proper 30-day notice, if that was the board's intention.
Okay.
Did you have an opinion, or did staff have an opinion as to whether the things have changed in relation to this proposal enough that it would need to possibly be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission?
I mean, I think that we're probably all aware that it has changed significantly since the first time it went through the Planning Commission. The route has changed. The recommendations have changed. I don't think it would be inappropriate for it to go back to the Planning Commission at this time to reestablish what the rules are and what the recommendation of the Planning Commission is. But I'd probably ask the County Councilor as to whether we can make that direction or not.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, good morning. This is David Van Paris. I believe it's in the sound discretion of this board in evaluating any application how to proceed on this. As Mr. Lawfrey has alluded to, there have been, and very apparent, substantive changes to the application during its course, both in response to inquiries this Commission has made, as well as changes made by the applicant itself. Consequently, I believe it's in your discretion. If you wished to, at this point in time, have some report made to you by planning staff for you to consider whether or not it be resubmitted to the Planning Commission. I do believe you should be provided some information with respect to the changes in the application prior to making any determination as to whether or not to send it back to the Planning Commission. But if you believe that there have been such substantive changes that the nature of the application itself has changed, referral back to the Planning Commission could be appropriate.
Mark, if it were to go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, what is the earliest the Planning and Zoning Commission could review it, and ultimately what's the impact to the applicant, knowing that earliest we would hear it is July 8th? If it went to Planning and Zoning, what's the earliest we would hear it?
Well, I think we probably missed the deadline for the June Planning Commission meeting, so it would be in July to go to the Planning Commission. It'd be in July, and then back to this board in August. Yeah. So it'd be the same date at the Planning Commission that I would say would be here. So it would be August for us to hear it. Then is that right? It'd be about August, first part of August.
So, where you're saying there'd be a 30-day public notice to have it on the planning commission, and then another 30-day public notice to have it to the Board of County Commissioners for a public hearing?
It's not 30 days notice for the planning commission. We, at the board level here, had just said we would give 30 days because that's extra notification. But I think it's 20 days notice at the planning commission. So it would be on in July. It would basically delay it at a minimum 1 month coming back to this board if it went back to the planning commission. But we don't know what the planning commission might do either. So, I mean, they could decide that they wanted additional time to review it because it is pretty significant changes and plans. So the earliest it would be back to the Board of County Commissioners would be in August.
So that's the minimum delay.
That would be the minimum if it went back to the planning commission.
It's been delayed now it was delayed because of the Linwood tornado, correct? And then it was tabled or removed and then put back on, and then now the virus delayed it. And now it's going to be put back on.
Right.
But it has significantly changed, and that's kind of the what they considered at the planning and zoning level last time isn't anything close to what we have now.
Well, I don't disagree with that, and I'm not opposed to it going through the planning and zoning process again. I'm opposed to another month, 2 months, 3 months of delay at the applicant's request. I realize it's unforeseen circumstances a number of times now.
And this is Commissioner Culberson. I agree with Chad. I think this thing's been drug out so long now. We need to get it done.
Okay. So you need a motion on anything today, Mr. Lawfrey?
But we would need direction to proceed with, if it's going to be before this board, we would need direction. Do you want to still maintain that 30 days notice, or would you like to put it on June 24th, which is what they requested? That 30 days notice was something that we adopted here, but it's not the 20 days is the requirement.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this is David Van Purris again. Commissioner, Mr. Lawfrey is correct. The 30 days that was alluded to is not statutorily required. However, this body did publicly state on more than one occasion that it would provide at a minimum that amount of notice, and I would strongly suggest that that 30-day period be provided.
This is Commissioner Cos. Isn't today the 20th?
It is.
Well, 30 days notice would make that the 20th of next month, correct?
Well, we would have to prepare the notices and get them in the newspaper and then also in the mail. So we need a week basically to prep that, and we just don't think the 24th would be, we'd be right up against that with the weekend coming and whatnot.
Okay.
I just think that considering that the route has changed and considering all the various changes, that, when this does come before us, it would be nice to have a real proposal that has been thoroughly vetted. And I guess it seems like that's the role of the Planning Commission to do that.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Is there a scenario where, obviously we have our staff, we have our consulting firm, obviously everybody's worked very closely through the different iterations of this. Is there a way to submit and get even planning and zoning feedback rather than a planning and zoning meeting as to not delay this further? Because my concern is if we can't even guarantee an August date, that's...
I don't think legally that we could, because it would have to be a noticed agenda item for them to discuss it. They can't discuss it individually and then give us feedback. So,
Did they call a special meeting?
Again, it would require the same notification process, so it would still be a special meeting would be later in June. That might move that up to where we would hear it in late August or late July instead of early August. But they could.
Okay.
I mean, I'm in favor of that if we can get planning and zoning feedback and still accelerate the date.
Do you think you could, what do you think, Crystal? Do you think?
We can get it done.
ASAP?
For a second. I don't have a calendar in front of me. As Mr. Lafferty and Mr. Van Paris stated, we have to give a minimum of 20 days notice. Part of that has to be in the newspaper. The newspaper has to be there a couple of days beforehand so they can get it set for print. I think the earliest we can get it in the newspaper would be Monday, which is not sure what date. Monday.
No, I don't think
It's
you're
a holiday.
right. That's a holiday.
That's been working.
Right, so
Tuesday.
Tuesday. So Tuesday would be the most realistic date. So Tuesday would have to be a minimum of 27th. So the 27th is the earliest date we'd be looking at. I can certainly call my planning commissioners and find out if the 27th is a date that can work for them, and if it will work for them, then we can.
Well, the 27th of May would be the publication date, so 20
Right.
days out from that, and in June, I don't have a June calendar.
Well, your June 10th is your next.
That's my next.
So it would be the 17th or the 24th, so probably the 24th of
Yeah.
June would be the special meeting date, which is the date that they wanted to have the meeting here, so.
Well, right, but you said it was already going to be July 8th anyway.
That would be, well, because you've made the commitment here
Right.
for the 30 days, and
Understand.
there they would only need 20 days, so that's why they could get it on to the 24th.
Right, but if they get it on the 24th, what's the earliest then?
We hear it.
3 weeks.
Well, we really wouldn't be able to schedule the public hearing until after the planning commission heard it. We couldn't, jointly schedule it, I guess, because you don't know if the planning commission would actually move it forward from that point. So then, as soon as they would have it, you would need 30 days from the day after, I assume, would be the very minimum.
Till the end of July,
So it'd be the end of July.
rather than July 8th. It's just basically 2 weeks.
Commissioners, potential dates would be if notice could be effected on May 27th, the planning commission could hear the matter, say, on June 24th, potential hearing date before this board on July 29th. Of course, that is, as Mark alluded to, incumbent upon any action taken on the part of the planning commission.
So what would we need to do to make that happen?
Technically, Commissioner, Planning Commission is a separate body. If this, a possible course of action would be for the Board of County Commissioners to request the Planning Commission to conduct a special meeting to review the application, asking that special meeting take place on the 24th of June. Provided that action is taken by the Planning Commission on that evening, the board could then schedule the matter for the 29th of July. But again, the scheduling of the 29th of July is incumbent upon whatever action, or dependent upon whatever action is taken by the Planning Commission on the meeting of the 24th, should they agree to have one.
So that's my motion.
Okay. I have a motion. I have a second.
Then there's still no guarantee we see it on the 29th.
It's not a guarantee, no, because the planning commission could decide they need more time to review it properly. I mean, I wouldn't want to anticipate what they may want to do or need to do. And that is a very tight window to get the 30-day notice out, but we would do what we could if that's what happened.
Have a motion on the floor. Motion dies from lack of a second.
This is Commissioner Culberson. Can you repeat the motion, please?
Good luck.
Gentlemen, again, David and Commissioner Cos, excuse me. Commissioner Stephen, please correct me if I'm here off course. I believe the motion of Commissioner Culberson was to ask request that the Planning Commission conduct a special meeting on or about June 24th for the purpose of reviewing the Caw Valley Sand Operation Special Use Permit, with the concept that notice would be provided through efforts of staff, and that dependent upon any action taken by the Planning Commission, that it would be the intention of the board to possibly have a final consideration before the Board of County Commissioners on the 29th of July.
Thank you.
So are you redoing your motion?
I'll resubmit it if anybody wants to second it.
Okay, you can resubmit. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Motion dies for lack of second. Anyone else want to make a motion?
One thing I would ask too is we originally said we'd have an evening meeting, given the challenges we have with our public meetings right now and the limitation on attendance. It might be a little easier if we had that during the day, because
Yeah,
we will have
we're
to
gonna be
allow,
limited on crowds
we'll have
anyways.
limited people coming in and out of the building. We'll need somebody, and I don't know, evening-wise, if that's as tenable as it would be if we could do it during the day. So that would be another thing I'd ask you to consider.
What phase does that look like? Is that 5.5?
Well, we went 1.5,
Now
we're at
two,
kind of
next
2,
Friday.
not quite 2 now, so hard to say.
1.8.
We might be at 3 or 2.9 or something like that by that time.
Commissioner,
Hasn't this
I
board-
think we've shifted over to the binary system.
I think the board did vote that we were going to have an evening meeting, correct? So we would have to, by vote, change that.
Right, so my point was, is it likely that far ahead of time that, provided things don't change greatly, that it may not be as big of a worry?
Yeah, by the end of July. I mean, I would hope that we are, in fact, the governor was talking about that maybe by the June 15th, that's on her plan, and maybe Jamie could address this.
Well, I think one of the things that the challenge will be, regardless of the phase, at that time, we will still be practicing social distancing in here, so we'll still have a limited capacity. We won't be able to allow people to stack up out in the hallway. It'll be a kind of a one in, one out, and they'll have to leave the building. And I don't know if in the evening, if that's easier, or if during the day. Administratively, we have more staff here. We
We're
can
going to
help.
need staff to do the escorting.
We can have more staff here. That's the only reason I'm asking. If it's the evening, we'll make accommodations for the evening. I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified.
So many
if
people-
we reschedule this.
So many people would like to attend, that's why we changed it to the evening. I think that we should do whatever we can to accommodate them.
Anyone want to make a motion on this?
Well, I mean, I would make a motion to, hear it as early as July 8th. I mean, I wish there was a way to get additional, comments and feedback from planning and zoning. My bigger concern is, fairness all around. Most of this information, albeit has changed over a long period of time, it's also been a very long period of time. And so stretching it out another 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, I believe is unfair to the applicant as well. So, I'm of the opinion that I can, on July 8th, with the help of our staff and our consulting firm, be educated on the matter. So my motion, I guess, would be to hear it on July 8th.
At 8 p.m. or 9 a.m.?
Hey,
Or- no,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
did we say 6 p.m.?
Yeah.
And continue with the evening so that more
Okay.
people can attend, and hopefully the sheriff can help us with the logistics.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
Commissioner Culberson votes aye.
All right, thank you.
That's all I had under administrative business.
Okay, well.
Thank you, Christine.
We have a EMS proclamation for the week of May 17th through the 23rd. Leavenworth County EMS Week proclamation to designate the week of May 17th through the 23rd, 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week. Whereas emergency medical services are a vital public service And whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And whereas emergency medical services have grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventive medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of the emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now, therefore, the Board of County Commissioners, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 17th through the 23rd, 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week. Jamie, thank you and your staff for everything they do and all the people that support your staff.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, and your staff.
Absolutely.
Is there any other administrative business at this time?
Since Mr. Miller is here, I think it might be appropriate for him to just give a quick update on where we are with 1.975 or whatever phase we're in, and also where we're at with county.
Thank you, Commissioners. As you're aware, yesterday the governor signed into Executive Order 20-34, moving the state of Kansas on Friday from 1.5, phase 1.5 to a modified phase 2. What that also executive order is doing is modifying both phase 2 and phase 3. If you look at the mass gathering is what really changed in that, as well as opening up some other businesses. There are some exceptions to those businesses that are going to remain closed during the phase 2, which in the governor's order, those exceptions are bars, nightclubs, and swimming pools at this point. It is tracked that in phase 3 those would open up as well. From the governor's order, and every indication is as long as we stay on track. But again, we just went into phase 1.5 on Monday, and we're now moving to phase 2 on Friday. So it really is.
Jamie, read the exclusions one more time?
I'm sorry?
The exclusions one more time?
The exclusions still are bars, nightclubs, and swimming pools.
So casinos made it.
Casinos made it, yes.
I'll be down.
I think fairs and whatnot are still excluded.
There's more. There's some other. That's the actual.
Imagine that.
Fairs, festivals, carnivals, parades, summer camps without exception by licensed daycares are also still included in that. But that's the actual business side of what is still being closed by the order of phase 2. Phase 2 is expected to last until June 7th unless it is, again, amended by the governor's office. Phase 3 is expected to begin Monday, June 8th, and that would move mass gatherings to 45 individuals on June 8th. So that is where we're at right now on governor's orders on phasing Kansas back in. Locally, as you've been told, we've still remained putting our numbers out almost daily. We have moved from the health department side. We are not putting our numbers out over the weekend. We'll be pulling those numbers and putting those out on our Monday releases. And I'm going to look at potentially, as the state over the last week and a half has changed, putting their numbers out just Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I think it's important, though, as we're tracking our numbers locally, I'm trying to put those out at least throughout the week so everyone can stay abreast of where we're at. Currently, we're at For the county, it is 1,053 total cases. However, of those, 812 are affiliated with the LCF inmates. 67 of those are with the Grossman Center, and 174 of those are community cases. Of those 174 community cases, 73 remain active, which means the other cases have been put into a recovery status. They have met the obligation of quarantine, isolation, and recovery. And then we have also had 7 deaths. Only of those 3 are within the community. The other 4 are affiliated with LCF inmates. There was some question and concern that we were not tracking the 2 LCF guards that passed away. Those guards actually lived in other counties, so those were numbers that were affiliated in other counties. So that's where those numbers were attached to. So we would not be able to report on those numbers. Any questions that I can?
It looked like the hospitalizations have remained pretty stable.
They have. The hospitalizations have remained pretty stable. The recoveries have been on the uptake. We've been monitoring. We monitor all the active cases on a daily basis. So we're really trying to have a good understanding of where we're at. We are performing testing Monday through Friday, still out at the health department. We average anywhere from about 30 to 50 a day out there just in community testing. So we've been pretty busy remaining out there on doing testing, going after some of these cluster spots. The Grossman Center, we have been very active in that from the very beginning as we put out our press release on that. We were notified of 2 active cases, positive cases. Immediately we quarantined that entire facility. We were notified and in contact with the Bureau of Prisons. We made a game plan to go in and continue every 7 days. We test the entire facility and rotate individuals from rooms that need to be isolated or quarantined to the best of our ability. We've provided and helped with PPE, some cleaning, guidance, things of that nature in there. And quite frankly, as the numbers grow in the Grossman Center, we're not seeing the growth in our community. So that means that the isolation and quarantine of what we've done to the Grossman Center has worked, and that's what it's all about. Unfortunately, the living arrangements, when you look at a halfway house that's a dorm type setting, it is a standard. It is going to go through that facility quite rapid. It is going to be very difficult, but we are isolating it to just the actual Grossman Center at the moment, and we're getting those that are negatives out and things of that nature. So we are seeing it grow in numbers. However, we're not seeing the growth into our community from that. So again, I feel that we've done a very good job with the Grossman Center. That those are individuals that did work in our community, do work in our community, things of that nature, and we were able to get in quickly and quarantine them down and lock it down. And that's what is the success when you look at trying to mitigate the virus from spreading into the community. We didn't see a mass uptake in numbers just because we had the numbers are still remaining at the Grossman Center.
Jamie, does your team have everything it needs from does your team have everything it needs from a PPP perspective?
We do.
Any sourcing challenges you guys are having?
We have at the very beginning, again, as I said before, at different times that we've been in front, we were very fortunate because, again, we've maintained a certain level of preparedness for any sort of pandemic or outbreak, and we really stocked up back in the Ebola kind of time frame, so we had a lot of PPE materials on hand to get started. That allowed us to get started through the process. We were able to, with the declarations that we've done, draw down from the S&S, Strategic National Stockpile, some more PPE that allows us to continue our testing, continue going into, lack of a better term, hot spots or like the Grossman Centers and things of that nature with enough PPE and provide PPE. And then we're also seeing some of the supply chains coming back up to where we have placed orders clear back in February and they're starting to come in. So I feel that we are prepared. We do have enough PPE to accomplish the levels that we're at now. Even if we were to go forward, we did make some purchases for additional PAPR devices, which are positive air pressure respirators. You look at them, they're a helmet with kind of a big shield around it. We purchased some more of those, and those are supposed to come in here in the next, either at the end of this week or next week. So, I feel we're prepared in the PPE side of things. And again, it took some creativity in finding some other manufacturers, but we're able to maintain what we need for EMS, health department, doctor's offices. We've provided a lot of that type of PPE out to even doctor's offices and some of the nursing homes and things of that nature, first responders. So,
I was going to say, so same for sheriff's department and other first responders. As far as you know, everybody's got what they need.
yeah,
Do you feel that all of this effort and everything that everybody has done in the community has actually helped to, break this curve? Do you think we've had an impact?
yeah, and if you look again at the graph, our 14-day moving window and such, we are on a downward trend of call volume. If you really look at numbers and such. Again, you look at hospitalizations, you look at deaths, you look at all of that in all the matrix, and again, we do have little nooks and valleys, if you will, on what's being reported. But I can also look back on when disease started. I can also look on when those tests were, when the tests actually come in and are being reported. So you can do some averages of those, and that's again why it's so important to look at averages when you look at our trends and not just single days or single weeks or things of that nature. You really have to look at the long trend of it. You can see we are on a downward trend in what we're averaging coming through. Now, as we open things back up and people are starting to become into places, again, that are more closely, we're going to have cases. Cases are going to happen. We're going to see those. But that, again, is where the contact tracing and monitoring is going to have to play in. People need to report, and get tested. And if someone's feeling ill, they need to stay home. The social distancing, this is really where it comes back to the community. And this is what, at the very beginning of this, we didn't know. And now we know a lot of information, and we're moving forward on some of this information. And one of the main things CDC even released yesterday, the primary exposure is still person to person. It is not surface. It is person to person. So social distancing is going to be the key in this as we move forward. And as long as we keep social distancing going, I think that, we are on the right path of opening back up and getting back to, what we all want. But it's still, the virus is not gone. And I can't repeat that enough. The virus is not gone. We see that. We're still testing. We're still seeing it. And you can see what can happen by looking at LCF or Grossman centers, that if you do have a mass gathering with somebody and not providing, the proper social distancing, what can happen. And that's a key indication because, again, they can't provide their own social distancing inside a facility like that. So that really shows what can happen in the social distancing arena, if you will, of how quickly a virus can spread throughout a population. So,
Jamie, what are the either, let's say the Kansas, the state infection rate? If you were just to look at Leavenworth, right, it would almost lead you to believe that, a third of people who get tested have it, and that's only because 800 of them are inmates, and those conditions are unlike anything you've ever seen, which is not like New York, because when you travel, it's in a steel metal tube right on top of each other every day. That's how you get around. So what has been the Kansas infectious rate as a whole? Are we still around that 10% as far as people that get tested? Is it slightly less? Is it slightly more?
I have not looked because, again, the latest hasn't come out. It'll come out today.
Okay.
Where we're at and what they looked at for those metrics for moving. Obviously, that's what they've looked at the state level as to move us to the next metrics level. So I don't really want to. I don't know what they've seen that is making us being able to move from 1.5 to phase 2 already within kind of that week. So obviously some new metrics have come forth. I don't know. If you look at our metrics within the community, it's pretty low per population. However, I will tell you when I went in and did the Grossman Center and we did a across-the-board testing of the entire facility, about 80% of those were asymptomatic. So
I've heard numbers as high as 90 in some instances.
exactly.
Asymptomatic.
And again,
90%.
we saw the same happen within LCF when they decided to finally do a blanket testing of an entire wing or area of inmates. 75% of those were asymptomology carriers of it. So again, I think that's going to be the key as we move forward. I think there's a lot of virus out there, and again, that's why social distancing is so important, that it's out there. People are walking around today. I'm going to tell you, even within this room, there may be a person that is in this room right now that's a carrier of it and feels completely fine, asymptomatic, and we wouldn't know.
Question on that, asymptomatic, how have they studied or do they know how, if you're asymptomatic, how long a period are you?
The asymptomology shedding up. The problem with that is you don't have a start date per se of when onset of shedding started.
Mm-hmm.
That's why symptomology is so important to us. When fever starts, when symptoms start shortening, that gives us a time frame of about when you were exposed, when the disease process was that 2 to 7 days. The unfortunate part with asymptomology, you don't know where you're necessarily at in that range. So again, the rule for us is 14 days from the time of test, and then we are retesting on 7 days and 14 days on asymptomology to try to figure out where they fit within the range of.
I read some articles that it's been like out into the nearly 30 days.
Yeah, you can have up to 6. We've had individuals up to 6 weeks that have continued to either convert over into some symptoms or have remained in that positive on testing.
So if you have a pre-existing condition, et cetera, it's probably still a good thing to not be out and about as much as you normally would.
Correct. And that goes for everyone needs to take care of themselves. If you know your body, everybody needs to take precautions. I can't stress that enough, that the disease and the virus is not gone. Even though we're opening things back up and trying to get moving back in the community and things happening, you need to, if you don't need to be somewhere, you don't need to expose yourself, don't expose yourself. I mean, that's really where it comes to, and I know we're back to trying to take common sense and things of that nature, but again, from the public health standpoint, the health and science side of it, it really needs to be said, and we're trying to push. I know there's a lot of people on both sides of the fence right at the moment of saying, well, it's really nothing, and it all the way to, I'm never leaving my house again. And again, it's mine to play that pendulum in the middle of saying, no, we all need to just understand what we're dealing with, and we need to protect our community.
Thank you for everything you
Jamie,
said.
this is Commissioner Cobb.
Yes,
Could
ma'am.
you do a little bit of discussion of the wearing of masks and whether or not that should continue or if it is safe or appropriate?
CDC is still stating that masks when social distancing or in rooms where multiple individuals are, such as grocery stores, as we are in this kind of area, it is appropriate to still have a face covering. Again, face covering is not protecting others from giving you the virus. It's basically taking down the particulate of when you talk and when you cough and things of that nature. It is not to be worn when you're by yourself in your car and things. There's been a lot of people, I know there's lots of studies and things happening out there about wearing masks and how CO2 retentions and all the other. It's for brief periods when you are in areas in which you are going to be in close distance and or in areas where social distancing is difficult. You should wear a mask. That is the recommendation. We are not requiring it. However, the recommendation is if you are around, especially in food service and things of that nature, where you could put particulates from yourself onto someone's food and they're going to ingest that, that's a high probability. So those are things where we're trying to work with restaurants and fast foods and things of that nature. Anytime you're in close contact, we're trying to recommend that facial covering is there.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Miller? Well, thank you.
Yeah, keep up the great work. Thanks, Jamie.
Okay. Is there anything else on administrative business? Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. As Commissioners have anything that needs to be removed or considered separately on the consent agenda?
Can we remove the check register, please?
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus the check registry.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting? Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Cos votes aye.
Commissioner Culberson votes aye.
And I'll entertain a second motion to approve the bills on the that were on the consent agenda that was pulled out separately.
I'll make a motion to approve the check register as presented.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I did have a question on the drug screens. Is that prisoners
Pre-employment. Probably.
pre-employment? Okay, I wasn't sure what that was.
Okay. Any other questions? Or they could be random.
I just didn't know what that was.
This particular one is pre-employment. Also, it's physical capacity testing.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Then voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos abstains.
Commissioner Culberson votes aye.
All right. Thank you. All right. Now we're ready for the request for the refund of a road improvement fee and a traffic impact fee.
Commissioners, you've been presented a request via email to waive these fees. These fees are required with any new building permit in the county. We have recently debated and discussed the policy change, but that change in policy would not alleviate the necessity of paying these fees. The applicant or the requester is here to make their case for you.
Now, we have waived these on state highways.
Typically, under a special use permit for commercial, you have considered waiving these on state highways. On a RIF-TIF for residential application, I'm not aware of any that we've waived it on recently, even on a state highway, because typically you can't build on a state highway if it's a house. So,
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Kylie Dixon. This is my husband, David Dixon.
Morning. Morning.
We live at 25319 147th Street with our two young boys, and we're building right next door to it. 147th Street is Lansing. They maintain that road. We're also having to meet the requirements of Lansing and Leavenworth County. We've had to pay 2 entrance fees, one to Leavenworth County, one to Lansing. We feel like we're being penalized for being required having to meet both requirements. And
Now, on 147th Street, does the county maintain the drainage structure? The 147th is just maintained by the city?
so in this case, I actually did reach out to Public Works and had the Road and Bridge Supervisor review this for me. Going forward, because Lansing did require they provide a paved driveway entrance, the maintenance of the tube will be the City of Lansing's issue, not ours. So waiving the driveway entrance fee, I think, would be appropriate since we are no longer.
Okay.
The fee is for doing the inspection and everything else, but they had to pay a $15 fee to the City of Lansing. So our $150 fee, we won't be maintaining it going forward.
But we refund 125 of the 150. It's a bond.
So
You
again,
receive that anyways.
Right.
So it'd be a $25 fee, basically, for going out and sizing the culvert. But we were going to stop sizing culverts on 147th?
I think we still do that. It's just that after the fact, we don't maintain it going forward.
Okay.
Mark, it's my assumption, so correct me if I'm wrong, but more often than not, building permits that come through the county are generally on a county road or a state road, generally not a city-maintained road. Is that fair, or would you say
I
We
think
received
since,
quite a few.
I think since probably 90% of our roads are the ones you mentioned, then typically most applications would be on that style of road. But it's not, this is not the only road that this would come into play on.
Right.
We have other roads that are like on the county line where maybe one county or the other maintains it, but it's still, you're in Leavenworth County, so these fees apply. And we have been equal in application on, to my knowledge, on all applicants. We haven't treated anybody differently.
But just, it seems to me that reason we've had all these discussions around building permits and RIF and TIF is because, I mean, at least since I've been here, we've had probably a dozen, at least, inquiries or questions specific to, well, what are you doing to my road? And how is, where are those dollars going? And so I agree with you that under the new policy that we're presenting, building permits all encompassing and nothing's broken out, so I don't think these type of issues will come up. You may not like the fee, which is probably most of the feedback we get. But it seems strange to me to have someone who's, again, building in the county, benefiting our tax roll, being penalized by two different, governing entities is my bigger
I don't see that it's a penalty. Our fees are our fees. They're not paying building permit fees to the city of Lansing, to my knowledge. They're paid a driveway entrance fee. I think it would be fair that we waive our $25 of our driveway entrance fee and to offset that. But the policy is applicable to all properties within Leavenworth County. They have a unique property in that it is in Leavenworth County, but it fronts a city street. That's not the only property out there that has this issue, and it's a policy that we believe is equally applicable to all applicants, and that's why we've asked them to pay it and required it. If we were adopting a policy that was going to do away with this, then I could also see making an exception in the interim, like we did, I think, for Angel Excavating or something like that. But that's not the case. The policy, the new policy, there wouldn't even be a debate because there wouldn't be a RIF-TIF fee. It would just be a flat fee, but it would be the exact same amount. They would be paying it regardless.
Right.
We have had, in the last 2 years, we have had people who have asked this same question, and because of the way their roads were either maintained by Atchison or Jefferson County, and we've required that they pay the fee. So I think, to be fair, not just to the applicant, but to everybody who's paid this in the past, I think that it should be applied in this case.
I know that there has been some that has been refunded for someone that lived on Markson Road. And then also with the road impact fee, traffic impact fee, we've lived on that road, we've been there over 5 years. He's lived on that road his whole life. We're not adding to the traffic. I just...
How much money are we talking about?
3,000.
3,000 for the RIF. And then because it's a Lansing easement, or the easement's Lansing, the entrance of the driveway has to be our surface, so we'd have to pay to have that either in concrete or asphalt. So you're talking about adding another, it was around $4,000 for everything here, and then probably another, up to $6,000 for the entrance. Because it's a city road, so that's kind of what we're looking at. That's why we're saying it kind of feels like we're being penalized because, we got to pay this here.
Are any of the other adjacent properties, so you have an existing, but let's say your neighbors, do their driveways meet the requirements that are being put on you currently?
No.
At the moment, no, because I think it's just time. I think when they paved the road, they might have been paved a little bit going into each driveway. But now, it's just everything's rock. On the roads, on the driveways prior to us, they're all rock down to the road. So that was kind of another.
They were probably there before Lansing took over that road.
Well, but that's my point. We run into these issues all the time where I think the reason we push for and promote for, contiguous is because that makes a lot of sense.
Annexation.
Right, but to make, again, because it's your current policy, make a new homeowner do something different than all of the other homeowners, I'm adamantly against.
Do we know how many, can we get that information, how many people are in the same situation as these folks are, that have had to pay, that are on a city-maintained street? Say in the last 5 years, was that unrealistic?
Well, you mean city or anybody any road that would be maintained?
Maintained by the city, yeah.
What about other than the county? Roads maintained by Jefferson County or Atchison County or the
Well.
Kansas, state of Kansas? I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's a,
So in
How
those,
about-
in those instances, are they usually having to pay
Yes.
Jefferson County and Atchison County?
they pay us because they're in Leavenworth County.
No, but I'm talking about, do they have to pay those other entities if those entities are the ones that maintain that road? See, in this instance, my problem is you're getting two taxing entities that are hitting you for a fee.
Well,
There's
Regardless of who
there's
maintains the road.
agreements between the counties.
Right, but they're not being hit for another fee by the city of Lansing. They're being required to pave their driveway entrance. That's not us requiring it, that's the city of Lansing.
It's still a fee
That's
to a
just-
homeowner.
That's just part of building on the lot that you own, and it's just like any other lot in the county. There are regulations and stipulations that apply. Before they started the process, I'm sure they knew that.
But we did pay it under protest because we never agreed with it, just because it is a Lansing road that Leavenworth County does not maintain at all.
Okay.
But again, the RIF and TIF fees are collected for a
For the
purpose.
township.
And the reason we're changing it is because people do come in and make the argument that they don't want to pay it because we're not improving the road in front of their house.
Right, how
It's
quickly
not
can we
for
get that
that.
done?
It's not for that, though. It's for the roads
Understood.
within the township.
And we don't travel the township at all. We use all Lansing roads.
But now, what kind of a precedent would we set if we exempt these folks? We'd have to exempt
Well, I
anybody else that came with this same kind of a concern.
think you would, and
And that's why
I
they're-
think it would also be fair that you go back to the people who made this argument in the past that we told no. If you want to be fair about it, that you would go back and refund their fees as well. I mean,
But when we changed to do away with RIF and TIF, it's going to be the same fee.
It's the same fee. It'll be the exact same fee. It just won't be called RIF and TIF. It'll be a bill and permit fee. So
So they still would have to pay.
they still would have had to pay. It just would have been called something different.
But that hasn't been changed.
What's the summary of fees here? So between your county fees and your city of Lansing fees, estimated ballpark?
I know for here, for the building permit and everything, it was $4,300 and some odd dollars. And then in order to do what Lansing wants, the permit fee, which I know wasn't a lot, but it was still a second entrance fee. We have to do a $5,000 bond, you know more than I do. And then the concrete entrance, which is,
Not a fee, but it's.
Sure, it's an
required,
incremental
which,
cost.
That's $5,000 to $6,000. So,
There was, we just see it as if there wasn't an issue with the RIF and TIF, then there wouldn't be, they wouldn't just be keeping the same amount as a fee and just changing the name. Obviously, there's an issue with it being a RIF and TIF.
exactly, yeah.
Well, regardless of where somebody lives, I have an issue with somebody having to pay upwards of $10,000 just to build a home here that ultimately we're going to collect taxes on for the infinite future, so.
Right.
Well, I agree with you, but some of that's macro, and this is the system we have set up right now. So, how do we? We can't just pick and choose. We got to implement the system we have.
I know that there has been instances of refunds given to, there's a county employee who lived on a state highway or state road. She did not have to pay the RIF and TIF. There was also, I heard of one on Markson Road. I can't remember the exact county, but
Is that recent?
Why not?
Is that recently?
2 years.
Do you know about that, Mark?
I'm not familiar with it.
Do you know the exact case?
I know we've waived it on special use permits on state
On
highways.
special use permits on state
On
highways, we
businesses
have.
On state highways,
Yeah, no,
but not
this was
residents.
This is someone in the clerk's office who had she did not have to pay a RIF and TIF because the county did not maintain her road.
Well, we could do some research.
Table us, get some
Do some
research on
research.
that. I would be for that.
Is that your motion?
Find out. I'm
I
not
mean,
making a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I don't have a problem with that, and I think, Mark, to your point, if if there were instances within a period of time that's reasonable, I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's 12 months or 24 months or 36 months. It's clearly not since the beginning of time. But if somebody came in and was denied, and obviously we've recognized that the reason we want to address the building permit fee is because this comes up and up and up, and I'm not disagreeing with you that the fee would be the same. In this instance, I think it is unique because you do have another taxing authority that's, in this case, doubling or tripling your overall cost of just trying to build in our county. That's not our fault that the city's doing that, but we should, I think, recognize that that is a problem for someone who's trying to build and improve the county, in my opinion. So if we're gonna table it, that's fine, and I don't think we should just go back and undo the 3 other or 6 other. I mean, if anybody feels that injustice or that we didn't hear their case, I mean, I'd more than welcome them to come back. But
I think,
This
I'm
is
sorry.
Commissioner Culberson.
Go ahead.
So there's a couple things going on here. One of the first big issues is the city limits goes down the center of 147th Street. So that's what really causes the problem in the first place. It's been brought up in the past. We don't want to let that happen anymore when a city annexes property. They need to either go all the way across the right-of-way and include the entire right-of-way or none of the right-of-way. And I don't think we've made that a resolution yet, but I think I'd like to do that today, is propose a resolution that we don't allow cities to annex half of a right-of-way anymore. They either take the whole road or none of the road. So that causes half of this problem. I think the other issue is the definition of a RIF and TIF. A lot of people, like in this case included, are thinking that it has to do with the road directly in front of their property. So the problem with this parcel is the parcel sits in the county, but the road itself, through, I think, an MOU, memorandum of understanding with the city of Lansing, is the city of Lansing actually maintains this road completely, both sides. Even though their city limits only goes to the center line of the road, we've already determined between the county and the city that it's a city right-of-way. So if the definition of the RIF and TIF that the applicant thinks is for the road right in front of their parcel, that's where it gets confusing. So if the street is a city street, I don't think the county has the right to charge them a driveway fee or the driveway inspection or anything to do with the actual road itself in front of their property. And I think that's why, mostly, we went to this other fee schedule, is because this gets really confusing, especially on these streets that are half city, half county.
Right.
But with the new fee schedule, that takes that out of the equation. We're not trying to describe, is it the road right in front of the parcel, or is it the roads in the township, or is it the overall transportation system, in the county? And who knows? The definition, for the RIF and TIF are too broad to nail down. So I think in this case, we don't have a right to charge double on any of the driveway fees. But if you could give me the actual definition of the TIF, I think that would clear it up. Is Crystal there?
She is.
I don't know if she has it handy, but I think that's where it gets confusing. Is it looks like we're double charging.
Right.
And Jeff, I don't disagree with that. We keep going into examples where, whether it's a state highway or whether it's an adjacent county or something else, and I just say, in all those instances, the state's not charging you. That adjacent county's not charging you. In this instance, you're getting hit by, again, Leavenworth and Lansing, and while, we should be working in much more collaboration than we do, I think everybody would agree, it's not always as black and white, in my opinion. I think it gets a lot more black and white with our new building permit. I wish it would have got done several months ago, but...
Well, but again, it's not a fee that the city is charging them. It's a building requirement. It's like a code that they have to build that driveway entrance to their code, not our code.
I agree with
not
you,
a fee.
but if someone has to pay it, it's an expense.
It's still an
I'm calling
expense.
it a fee.
I do understand that.
So we can call it whatever we want, doesn't make it suck less.
But it was an expense that was there from the beginning. So a lot of times these fees that we've waived, recently we had one just I guess it would have been last year, but we waived it because the person didn't know in advance that they had to pay it. We found out later, and we tried to collect it, and so we waived it because they didn't know. In this case, it was known up front. It was it's a policy, and we've been lectured on enforcement of policy by this board to make sure that people follow the policy. That's why we're trying to be very stringent on this.
Well-
It's your policy. You can set it aside if you like. That is absolutely within the power of the board, and it's at their discretion. But from a staff level, we have to enforce it, and we have to collect it.
And at what point, I'm sorry to
No, you're
interrupt you, but whether you drive on the township roads or not, that still benefits everyone, and everybody pays that fee when they build, because that money is used for the improvement of the roads within that township. And we've done a lot of improvements on the roads, and that money is very important to benefit the residents of the county for the improvement of those roads. So, we got to be very careful in picking a direction here, because I don't want to open the door to have tons of
Just
people
get the
coming
building
in and
permits
asking
addressed,
us.
we won't have any doors to open. And so,
Correct.
Mark, I
Well-
agree with you on following policy, but what happens is policy is followed, there's then feedback, there's then a board meeting, we decide policy can be improved. Building permits were addressed how long ago, and still here we are dealing with it. If we close the building permit door, it's no longer a problem. So following policy I have no problem with, until we get feedback from taxpayers. Taxpayers come in, they ask us a question, we go, you know what, that policy maybe it could be improved, and then we work as a collective team to improve it. I don't know why we still haven't improved it yet, that's my bigger problem right now.
Right.
In the meantime, the fact that anybody's building here and having to pay double, regardless of how much of a nuance it is, and when I say double, it's still an expense regardless of how we want to description or allocation or anything else. I think that's the bigger problem I'm having, so.
Yeah, and I agree with the concept of changing the rules, but we have to go by the rules we have right now.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Culberson on the way the annex is done, the annexation is done to the center of the road. That's why it's so important to have interlocal agreements with all the cities on who maintains what and where on that. We need to have them. They need to, have a 5-year term or something, and when they expire, we redo them. And we used to have them, and they've all expired, I believe, and we're operating off the old MOUs, and probably this road's not even part of it. I'd have to look at some of the old ones.
Commissioner Culberson, he mentioned, if the road is annexed, if it's running down the center of the road, would that not make my driveway exempt from Lansing?
I would have thought.
But
I was going to ask the county
if
council.
if there's a memo of understanding that and without having that in front of us, I can't answer that. Do we have a current local agreement, or are we just running on an expired interlocal agreement with Lansing?
This Commissioner Culberson, I'm just running on my conversation with the city of Lansing, because that's what I asked them if we had an MOU in place on 147th. They thought we did, but they're operating like we do. And so that's my point is, the way I'm looking at this is it's the same as if it's on a state right-of-way, because the county doesn't maintain any of this right-of-way. The building permit is in the county, but the driveway and the right-of-way is City of Lansing.
And that's why I was wondering if they had a memo of understanding that the county still sizes the culverts, but they have to build a driveway to Lansing standards.
Yeah, my understanding from my conversation with the City of Lansing was they maintain both sides of the road, the ditches, driveways on both sides of the road. They're considering it completely a city street.
Then Leavenworth County Public Works should not have to do the culvert sizing for these drainage structures.
Correct.
Okay. But that was a $150 bond, and you get 125 of that back.
We can, I would think it'd be reasonable to refund the entire amount,
Yes.
since it's not ours to maintain going forward.
Okay. Any other questions, concern, or need any more information on this? Commissioners like to get more information on this or make a decision?
So there was no RIF and TIF to the city of Lansing because the building permit was issued in Leavenworth County. So the Lansing cost to the applicant, to the home builder, is meeting their standards, which sounds like nobody else on that street meets, at least on that side, anyway. So,
They were probably in existence before.
And they were grandfathered in?
Before the
right, but it's
city
kind of like
brought
this
the
whole
road.
spot zoning argument. Like, again, it's either good for everybody or good for no one. You can't just pick and choose just because you're the latest to the, in my opinion, I just don't
Well,
think that's
it
fair.
probably goes back to, like Commissioner Culbertson said, is that first tier on the other side of a road needs to be zoned the same as the tier on the other side. Well, the city probably should annex the first tier when they annex the road to address these issues, so that if they're going to maintain the road, they should be providing the services as well. They didn't, and they don't have to, but that would have addressed this entirely. Then they wouldn't be paying us a RIF and TIF at all. It would all be within the city, but they'd also be paying city taxes too, which they aren't on this property because it's in the county.
And again, I think, Mr. Sieben, you mentioned again, it's for the township, not right in front of your driveway, but ultimately the way this is set up, you're likely, if you're adjacent to and on a city-maintained street, you're going to use city infrastructure. You're not using township infrastructure to navigate. I mean, I doubt you're going to backtrack to take worse roads than take a city road to a state road, but.
Well, but sometimes we don't use all the infrastructure that we pay for.
Oh, I don't disagree there.
So let me, just clarification, staff recommendation is that we do not grant this exception except for the the $150 fee.
The driveway permit fee.
Yeah.
Because they had to pay the city a driveway permit fee.
So I think that's, unless we go in and redo the entire policy and then, table this, redo the entire policy and then revisit it, I think I'm going to side with the staff recommendation on this one.
Well, building permit should have been solved, in my opinion, months ago, but just because we haven't done it yet doesn't mean it should have been done.
Well, I agree, but
But if
before.
we change it, it's still going to be the same fee.
Right.
Right.
So there you go.
All right, Mr. Herring?
Joe Herring, surveying 315 North Fifth. Good to see everybody personally again.
Good morning.
Different from our client. The client that had his RIF waived on Markson Road was also my client, Bob May, which was done probably 2018, if not late 2017. He paid it. It's a Wyandotte County maintained road, built in Leavenworth County. He got his RIF waived. I would question if anybody's paid RIF on a state highway and built a residential. I'd like to see that research.
Okay.
I would think that would, you would find that they didn't pay, and if they did, they probably shouldn't have paid. Because that's how you view SUPs. If you're on a state
Right.
highway, you don't enforce a RIF because it's not maintained by the county. So, I have heard of 2 other cases within the last 2 years that have accessed Atchison and Jeff County, maybe Douglas County. They were forced to pay their RIF, although the county did not maintain the road. That's my knowledge of it, but I think there are some cases out there where it was refunded. I am definitely aware of the one for Bob May. And I'm sure there's some that built on state highways did not pay it in our recent time.
I'd like to have a little more research done
Okay.
before, if that's the case. Mark, you don't think that's applicable to that case specific, or you don't recall it?
I think it's, if it happened, it happened. I have no reason not to believe Joe when he says that happened. I'm sure if that's what he says happened, that's what happened, absolutely. I would question whether it was appropriate, or if it came to this board for approval, then obviously this board can waive theirs.
But you don't recall the specific
I
case?
don't recall it. I do recall the ones where we've enforced people to pay because, they made a complaint, they filed an issue, we went through the process and we made them pay. They appealed to the board withheld it or held it up and made them pay as well. So those are the ones I remember. I don't specifically remember Bob May. We can definitely look it up, but I'm still not sure how it's germane to this particular case.
Well, again, maybe it's only me, but I'm of the opinion if you're building on whether it's a state highway, an adjacent county road, or an adjacent city road, I would have the same position as far as waiving it, which is why I want to go to a uniform building permit and not have any more discussions about it.
Correct. And when are we going to do that?
I don't know. I'm surprised it's not done.
Next week.
Next week. Awesome.
Done. Okay. So are you wanting more information?
Yeah, I guess I'd make a motion to table this and let the planning and zoning and county administrator research specific cases on this and bring back more information for us to make a more informed decision.
Okay.
What specific information are we looking for, and I just want to
How
make
many
sure
cases have been exceptions in the past, and were there extenuating circumstances that, how does that compare and contrast with this case?
But, Mike, I'd make the argument again, whether we can find a substantial number of precedent or not, I'm of the opinion that should have been how they've been handled, whether we've done so successfully or other prior boards. I think it's a very
Then you're talking about
difficult
policy, and I agree with the policy change, but that would be, moving forward.
and the policy change would
But it's still
require
a policy
collection as
thing.
well.
Right.
So,
But as far as this particular case, I think we need more information. But that's just my opinion, so.
And like Mark said, he said that we paid it knowing what we were paying for, but we paid it under protest because we always thought it was wrong, and we had to build. So it was either, we had to buy it, or we had to pay for the building permit. So you say, you know what you were paying for. We did, but we paid it under protest because there was no other way around it to start building.
And Mark, I don't disagree with you that the fee would be the fee. My issue is that this is unique in that there are city expenses associated with it. All those other examples of building on a state or building on an adjacent county, there are no additional fees to the person that's building. So, again, that's where I'm at. Regardless of whether that same fee would be the same, there's not a lot of instances of you being in $10,000+ just to erect a home in our county that ultimately we're going to tax you on. So I think that is what's somewhat being lost here is, again, state highway or adjacent county road, there are no collections of an additional governing body. In this case, there is. Bad luck or otherwise, I don't support it. So.
This is Commissioner Culverson. I have a question for Crystal. There's a parcel that's getting asked to get a building permit for that's in Leavenworth County, but there's no road access to that parcel. You actually have to go through a different county and enter the property from a county road in an adjacent county to get to it, even though the parcel's in Leavenworth County. Is that building permit, if it's granted, going to require roof and TIF fees?
Commissioner Culbertson, yeah, so that property is at the Atchison County line, if we're talking about the same property, I think we are.
Yep.
Under the current policy, yes, it would be subject to the building permit fees of Leavenworth County. The two properties that have been talked about throughout this discussion, one was Douglas County and the other one was Jefferson County, and those also were required to pay the Leavenworth County building permit fees. I believe one of them was on a Jefferson County maintained stretch of, I think, 254th Street, and they got their entrance permit through Jefferson County. However, they did pay the building permit fees through Leavenworth County. We also recently had a property that was switched in Jefferson County. Their property is in Jefferson County, but their driveway is on a section of Leavenworth County maintained road, so they got their entrance permit through Leavenworth County, but all of their permitting happened through Jefferson County. So for at least the last 3 years, that is the way that policy has been interpreted. If your property is within Leavenworth County, you pay Leavenworth County building permit fees. Sometimes the entrance permit comes from an adjacent county or vice versa.
I had a constituent that his road is maintained by Jefferson County, and he called and was concerned, why is he having to pay these fees when he was building his house? And we have agreements
With
between
Jefferson County.
right
On the county
So-
line,
so-
on certain miles of road.
So he had to pay the fees, and even though we directly don't maintain that road, but we have this agreement.
Mhm.
So it's
And
just-
it's expired too, but it's still in place, unless it's been updated since I left. But there is some paperwork with that.
So I do remember that case, though. That
Mhm.
was, and he was highly, and he was one of the folks that they came into the office, and someone in the office that's no longer employed informed him that he would not have to pay. And then he ended up having to pay, and you can imagine how that went over.
Really good.
So, not well.
Okay. So did you make a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'm not having much luck with motions
I
today.
know. Would you like to repeat your motion?
I'd like to refer this back to staff of planning and zoning and the county administrator to give us specific cases and do research on what's happened in the past so that we can make an informed decision.
Have a motion, to have a second? Okay, motion dies of lack of second.
Mike, the only reason I didn't second it is whether or not there's a ton of precedence. Any of those examples brought up, I know exactly how I would have voted, and I would have voted to waive it. So that's why I want this to get resolved in policy like yesterday. So
Okay. So are you going to make a motion?
Commissioner
Go ahead, Commissioner Cos.
I'd just like to interject that the reason that we get into any kind of trouble with any of these types of issues is due to failure to follow policy.
So are you willing to make a motion?
Can you give me one that, okay, I move to deny the request of the applicant to waive the building fees except for the $250.
150.
150.
Oh, okay, the $150 for the driveway entrance fee.
I second the motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Excuse me. Then voting.
Aye.
Aye.
nay.
Commissioner Cos votes aye.
Commissioner Culberson votes nay.
Okay.
I would suggest, I'd be happy to do it, whether I have everyone's support or not, is to help write a letter in our support for your driveway and making it known that requirements specific to your parcel and not adjacent parcels. I think common sense should prevail there. We'll see if it does with the city of Lansing, but see if we can't get some people who are building a home in Leavenworth County to have to pay less to do so.
Is that your motion?
Sure.
Have a motion from Commissioner Shimke to write a letter of support to the city of Lansing
Correct.
to waive the hard surface driveway
Requirement, correct.
requirement.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos votes aye.
Commissioner Culberson votes aye.
Thank you.
This Commissioner Culberson, I had two things. One, so the new policy that we're adopting on building permits fee schedule is going to wipe out any more of this RIF-TIF question.
That is correct.
But that's not in place yet. Do we have a timeline on when that might?
Literally, next week
Next
it will
week.
be on the agenda.
Okay. And secondly, I'd like to propose a resolution that we have on the books that we don't allow cities to annex half of a right-of-way. They either annex all the right-of-way or none of the right-of-way.
Okay.
I agree with Commissioner Culberson.
We
That was Commissioner Cos.
we could draft that resolution and put it on the agenda. I know in the past, I think the last one we had, Commissioner Culberson, was the city of Basehor. They were annexing out by the new schools, and we did require them to annex all of the right-of-way. So I can ask the county councilor to draft a resolution that would make that our policy going forward.
Perfect.
Get that
That's
on.
all I have.
Okay.
Okay. We're ready for Public Works. Mr. Knoll, sorry for taking up so much of your time this morning.
Morning, Bill.
How are you guys?
Good.
All right. What we have here today to consider is a request for the approval of additional funds for the utilization of the Olsen Master Agreement for Professional Services. This agreement was originally executed in 2019. Currently, this agreement has been billed out to approximately $250,000. The original agreement was for $285,000 total funds. With me coming on as a member of staff and some of these projects wrapping up, and Olsen taking less of a project management role, it is one of the top goals of the department to see these expenditures decrease from a project standpoint. Obviously, we're still going to have some consulting work done for the selection committees and for the reviews of the RFPs and some of the standards. But the reviews will continue also for the Lenape sand plant that was discussed earlier and the various planning and zoning applications. But we do anticipate seeing a reduction in this monthly billing cycle, and we have reduced the amount. We are asking at this time for approval of funds not to exceed $75,000. We do not want to come back in front of the board on a monthly basis for this necessarily, but I do not feel that it's pertinent to not have to come back in front of the board in the future to give updates on how this cost cycle is coming and any cost savings or advantages that have come from this agreement and all the professional services that they do offer. And so at this time, I'll try to answer any questions you may have that moving forward, or any comments.
Anyone have any questions? Mr. Knoll?
Well, just a couple things real quick. I think it's important to state that, Olsen, while, this is, an expensive relationship, it's also been a very valued one. Eisenhower alone, I think our savings were upwards of $500,000 due to their oversight that we would have ultimately paid if we didn't have them. So in that sense, they've definitely covered the expense. There could be other examples, I don't know. So those are always great, I think, to share when we're spending money externally and people are asking why. I am excited. That was the big question I had, Bill, was to see that you're working to try to get those resources to be reduced over time and drive some of our costs down and engage them on an as-needed basis. My question specific to the Call Valley was the example I had. When we have applications or nuances where our costs are substantial because of the complexity, how can we handle that so that it's not purely a county burden? It's not as though these are projects we sought out. These are projects that came to us. And so if it's well outside of our resources, can we put some kind of policy or some type of cap that says we're willing to spend X amount of dollars to help steward through this process? But at some point, I want the other party to take on some of this expense instead of just being a county burden. Doesn't that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. We've discussed that, Crystal and I and Bill and I have discussed that part of the application process for big projects like that one, or like any like it, they should foot the bill for those fees. I think the challenge with Caw Valley particularly is that they would then end up paying for an engineering firm to review the work of an engineering firm, so that maybe In that particular case, maybe a different process. Again, too late now. We went down this
Understood.
road.
Yeah, can't go
The
back.
process
Gotta
would
go
have been
forward.
that we engage an engineering firm to conduct all of the studies that needed to be done. In this case, it would have been Olsen because that's who we have in retainage, and that applicant then be expected to pay the cost of that project. That way, you're not asking them to pay their engineer and our engineer. And that's one of the discussions we've had going forward is maybe we just do it, and then we also then can quality control it at the beginning instead of having to do all the quality control throughout, which should be a significant savings to both parties.
How would you draft that kind of a policy, or how would you put, I mean, that sounds very good. That's something we should do, but how do we get there?
I think that probably requires a change to the subdivision guidelines.
I would think it'd be kind of referred to, I've heard it referred to in different counties as a professional fee disclosure form. And so when an entity comes and makes a permit application for some sort that requires some sort of engineering review beyond the scopes of a general engineer, you have to have some sort of specialized training. That professional fee disclosure form would have to outline, what those fee schedules may look like, and so there's an upfront acknowledgement of the county staff cannot be expected to be an expert in all fields.
Right.
Just think if the applicant gets denied after they spend all that money, though. They would not be happy. But in Bill and Crystal's professional opinion, how many staffers would this take to perform the duties that Olsen performs?
It would probably take the addition of 2 staff, more than likely, but there would still be some specialty staff like traffic engineer that you're not going to employ from the county.
Right.
And so there's hydraulic engineers and different specialty fields of engineering that no matter whether you add some of the staff, you're still going to supplement a review process through some additional staffing. So you could eliminate some of your staffing reviews that Olsen has currently been doing with the general PE. But we currently have staff that was scheduled to, but because of the coronavirus, sit for her exam, who could take on some of these subdivision reviews that Olsen had currently been billing us because of. And we can move towards some of those quickly. That's one of the areas where I could see a reduction in cost fairly immediately. That would be something that the county staff would not require a specialized field for.
Yeah, I think contracting, subject matter expertise is always far cheaper.
Well, that's what I
If you
was
can't
getting at.
afford all of it,
There's
so-
no way we could hire these staff
Right.
No.
to do away with this.
Even if you hired additional staff to cover some of the
You'd
costs,
still have to
you'd still
reach
have
out.
to-
Still have other expenses for sure.
Right.
Yeah, you're getting the services, like, for example, you're getting the services as part of the selection committee on the Eastern Gateway concept study of an Olsen expert who has vast knowledge of both MoDOT, KDOT, MARC, and infrastructure systems that you're not going to possess necessarily on a county basis because it would not be necessary. It'd be really expensive.
Okay.
So you're happy with how things are going?
Yeah. Their services are professional and quality.
They're able to meet all the deadlines.
Yep, they haven't missed
Okay.
deadlines.
All right.
The 2 staff, we primarily work with 2 members of their staff, and they were into a lot of the projects we had. And, had they not been a part of those projects, I wouldn't have been able to pick up
Okay.
with them and carry these things through to construction as quickly as they had. So, but moving forward, the project management aspect of our construction projects, the bridges and the road improvements, would be something that we would not really look for a consultant to help
Okay.
facilitate.
Any other questions of Mr. Knoll? I'll entertain a motion to either approve or deny.
I'll make a motion to approve the additional funds for utilization of the Olsen Master Agreement for professional services.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion?
I think it's important to underline exactly what Chad said. This organization has saved the county a lot of money, and we have benefited from them. Now, do we hiring consultants always has an upside and a downside, but this is something that has benefited the taxpayer.
And any other discussion and voting?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
Commissioner Culberson votes aye, and I had a couple questions for Bill for the lead.
All right, he's still sitting there?
You ran out, Bill.
One is E58 bridge.
You want a progress update for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we went ahead and had a pre-con meeting last week. We delivered our signed copy of the contract to them. We're awaiting the return of the bonds. We're anticipating that to be sometime between this afternoon and Friday morning that we will have those received, after which point we'll immediately issue a notice to proceed on the project. And currently, King's Construction is acting as a subcontractor of AM Coron, and they will be out on the site Tuesday after Memorial Day to start removal of the trees, and then quickly move to cutting the structure, saw cutting it, and removing the structure itself. And so by probably the end of next week, I think that you will see some significant changes in the way the site looks, with the bridge coming down and all the trees coming out. But we are moving forward with that as quickly as possible. It is a tight time frame project, and they're wanting to start immediately in order to not incur as many overtime hours.
Got it. Cool. And then the other question was Kennerit 1 cracks, but I think we kind of got that update last week.
Yep, so we're just awaiting the Terracon test results from that. Those borings have been collected, and generally you're looking at a 3 to 5 week turnaround to have your full engineered assessment report back for those cracks. It's been approximately 2.5 weeks since those borings were completed, so I would look for those in the next 2 to 3 weeks to be completed. As soon as we do have a copy of those, they will be included in a weekly report, and we can review them.
Thank you.
Does anybody know, are we getting close on getting that feasibility study back from Trans Systems on the East Gateway? I mean, that was a...
Yes, so I can give you an update on that. That will be in this week's weekly report, and whether it's a consensus item, there'll be some sort of discussion. There have been a couple locations that have been narrowed down. We have narrowed it down to 5 locations for a proposed crossing. Some of those vary between 152 highway and the 45 highway 435 interchange of how exactly it would tie into a MoDOT system. And so those can come back in front of you as early as next week. I was actually going to speak with Mark. We just got those yesterday.
Oh, great.
And so whether those will come back to the board as a whole, or if they wanted to come back to a selection committee, the original selection committee that reviewed that proposal, was the discussion that I was going to have. But they will be moving forward with the 3 final locations that they're going to complete their assessment on.
Yeah, I just didn't know with the pandemic if any of those timelines had to shift or move, no different than like the bonds. I didn't know if that's been slowed by what the banks and rating agencies and everybody else may or may not be dealing with. I mean, there's still PPP, work being done, and so I just didn't know if any deadlines had to shift or anything.
No,
So that's good.
I don't believe so. It's still moving forward fairly well. The bonds, for instance, we overnighted that contract to AM Coron. They received it on Thursday evening. Friday, they started trying to issue their bonds. They said it'd be approximately a 36-hour turnaround for that. So if that holds true, they would have sent those to us last night or this morning or sometime today. We'll receive those overnight FedEx today or tomorrow, probably. So I don't think that that's really affected anything so far on our projects or even the bidding of the projects. So.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Knoll? Thank you, Bill.
Yep, thank you guys.
Thanks, Bill.
Have a
We're
good
ready
one.
for Mr. Marlboro.
Mr. Larry, good morning.
How are you today, Larry?
Take it personally.
I
Very
do.
personal.
We shall continue anyway, yes?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Quarterly report contains a list of events that took place in the first quarter of this year. I feel kind of uncomfortable just reading it to the commission, so I'd rather just open myself up to any questions you may have, or to anything on or off the list.
Well, let's go off the list. Let's go, how are you coming with your budget wants and needs?
Well, I'll go with the needs only.
Okay.
Submitted the budget, was that a week ago? Yeah, Friday.
Okay.
I'm very pleased with the budget that I submitted. Hopefully, everybody up here will also be pleased. Because we've had some funding that was approved for this year, my budget request for next year is pretty flat. It's not going up, it's not going down a lot, but there are a few enhancements that I did ask for that I hope will get approval. I haven't had my meeting with the county administrator yet.
Oh, okay.
Got to go through that hurdle,
All right.
and that's brutal.
I know.
Once I survive that, then I'll
This is kind of a warm-up to that.
Sure. Maybe I can end run him a little bit and get some support
Okay.
right up front. That would be
Okay.
nice. But I'm pretty content with the budget I submitted, and hopefully Mark will as well.
Okay.
Larry, one of the things on your updates was the kiosk. If you had much feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, from
Well, ironically,
Timing was bad, wasn't it?
Was it 1 week or 2 weeks before the courthouse was largely
oh, I was
closed?
thinking it was longer than that.
Yeah, it was before, it was at least a month.
There were some fingerprints were on the kiosk, so we
Those were
know
Jeff's.
someone touched it.
Yeah.
But I didn't really sit up there long to see.
Okay.
I haven't had any feedback. We took pictures.
It looks
Mr.
great.
Knoll had just started when that went up, because we got him to pose at the
Okay.
kiosk for the Leavenworth Times. But most of this last 2 months, of course, it's just been sitting there.
Right, pretty idle.
It's going.
I was
Nobody's
thinking
there
it was
look at
closer to
it.
the first of the year, so my fault.
I think it was late February before I even got, because I had to get the utilities hooked up toward the end. I think it was March. First part of March, we got it live and working. Because I had an obstacle getting the board meetings to show up on it. Because I remember getting a visit from Commissioner Stevens. I demoed to you, I was working on getting the commission meetings to show up on the screen as it would be waiting for someone to come up. And eventually I got that resolved. Then Buildings and Grounds got the electrical work done for us, and we plopped it out there. I think it looks pretty good. Have you had a chance to?
Yeah, I've checked it out. I just wondered if any of the other departments had shared anything, whether it's been helpful or not.
I haven't heard from any of them.
Okay.
Do you think it looks
I think it looks great.
okay?
I'm more interested in utilization, but it looks great.
It's not too obnoxious sitting over there either. I thought it was fit rather well.
We might have to put a neon sign with an arrow.
Put some lighting on it.
Yep.
Buildings and Grounds is good at lighting now. We'll change the color every quarter. We're still doing that, I hope.
Okay.
Is there?
Larry, one of the and I apologize for yesterday, so one of the first kind of kickoff meetings of the website project, I thought was a virtual meeting, so my mistake. So I was nowhere near this room when that meeting occurred. So it brings up two things. One, I wanted to follow up with you on that meeting anyway, which we can do today, but Do we have a subscription that we use currently? I mean, do we have anything via, for staff, whether that's Zoom or the like, that we currently subscribe to so that it's likely to continue, that some people will from time to time be working remotely, or we're needing to engage with one another and we're not always in the same room? If it's not something we have, is that something we could look into as well?
Well, we took advantage of a 90-day free trial.
Right.
To log me in people, which is also GoToMeeting. They had merged a couple years ago. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with
All of them.
products, but we did sign up for that. We've got a ton of free licenses, so we've more than enough to cover anything we need for 90 days. I believe that extends into July. Hopefully this situation will be, much less come July. I don't know the time frame. But I do anticipate we're probably going to want to keep some licensing available once that trial expires. The courts have been going to Zoom as their product of choice because the state of Kansas has embraced Zoom, and I'm sure you've all heard Zoom. It's very fashionable right now. But that's district court's selection, and they're in the baby stages of acclimating to trying to conduct a hearing using video conferencing. They're currently working on that. They're going to, of course, pay for their own subscriptions and so forth. They'll cover their costs of that, and I don't believe it'll be very significant either. It's relatively inexpensive when you take it into consideration. And I think the same will probably be true with the county. Not too many employees have used LogMeIn or teleworking at this point. It's been a small number of individuals. It's worked out well for the ones that did, come up. But many of the departments, I don't know what they did, but they certainly didn't contact us.
So while that service may not be great for like the treasurer's office, for example, because of the transaction nature of it, I would think that like Crystal in planning and zoning, interfacing with an applicant rather than have to have them come all the way in, that would be a great way to conduct meetings. Or the appraiser, right? Somebody's got a problem and wants to talk through valuations. And so I could just see instances where it's less about our people working remote. It's more about our ability to interface with the public, and they don't necessarily have to come in here, and that could be a good thing.
Which is one and the same.
Right.
If you go down that path, while the citizen's sitting at home, the county employee could be virtually anywhere accomplishing the same thing, and neither is aware. Yes, the appraiser's office has not reached out too much. Crystal has used teleworking. Maybe 2 people in her department have. I don't have a firm list in my head, but a small number of employees have been doing a lot of teleworking. The IS department's been doing it a lot ever since March. We've just had one person on site each day at a minimum. So we've been working telework 99% of the time, and it's largely been invisible to everybody. They couldn't tell the difference. They call my phone, it rings, I answer. So they don't see me wandering around anyway, as a rule.
It has been made available to anybody who's wanted to use it. I think that there's been a couple of emails that have went out from Larry and maybe from one of the other departments actually soliciting that it's available if you need it.
Yes, we'll log you and all that. Yes.
So the emails have went out. I don't know largely that it's been used, but it's still on it's a free subscription basis.
We do have a ton of free subscriptions, but it's not a large amount of county employees are teleworking. To my knowledge, there's not a large amount.
Understood.
Does that answer what you're short after?
Anybody else have any questions? Mr. Marlboro? I guess we'll see you at budget time.
All right.
All right.
Maybe.
Good thoughts of me.
Maybe you'll see him at budget time.
You'll just approve it. You don't need to visit with me. It'll be unnecessary.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Have a good one.
Could we take a 5-minute
We can
recess?
take a 5-minute recess. Well, we're back in regular session. Do we have a council on agent quarterly
So,
report?
unfortunately, Commissioners, due to conflicts that are outside of work related, nobody from the Council on Aging was able to come over. We thought we had it covered, but something came up. So we can either put this on for another day, or they can wait till the next quarter when, whatever you prefer. The information is in the packet. If you want, I can try to go over it. Obviously, I wouldn't do it justice compared to one of the staff members, but I think the information that's in there is pretty self-explanatory and similar to what we hear each report. Obviously, the usage of the building has been halted since the start of this response to the coronavirus. We've closed all of the in-person classes and that stuff. Transportation was limited at first. It has been expanded a little bit. And the Meals on Wheels program has been very successful during this time through effort of the staff at the Council on Aging and through assistance from staff in other departments as well. I don't know when yet that we will be reopening the facility to the public because of the very nature of the people who we serve are those who are most at risk. I just don't think it's prudent at this time, and I've talked with the health officer. Even when we go back to phase, I guess the Ad Astra phase 3, we're really going to have to discuss how we open that back up, but that's probably when we would be looking at opening the Council on Aging building back up, is when the state goes to their phase 3, and not before then.
And that's perhaps the end of June, is that what they're talking, maybe?
It just depends. Obviously, we went from 1.5 to 2 in a 3-day period, and there was not supposed to be a 1.5, and the 2 is actually not 2, so
1.9.
I don't really want to.
We're making it up as we go.
Well, there is some of that. I mean, it is definitely at the state level. Throughout this, we've been a little bit discouraged by some of the communication. When this thing first started, I don't know if you remember it with the COVID response. The first started, the health officer came out, and said, "Hey, for schools, we think it'd be good. It was right during spring break. We think you should close for the next 2 weeks so we can evaluate where this is going." And the state called us and said, "You can't do that." The next day, actually, while we were on the phone with the state, the president's coming out and saying you should close all schools. The next day, the state came out and closed all the schools. I mean, that's how fast this thing changes. Right. It's not criticism, it's just how fast it's changing. So I think it was aggressive for them to put out a 3-phase approach. I think they should have done it one at a time and said, this is phase 1. When we get to phase 2, we'll let you know what it looks like. And but they did, and now they have to modify it, and that's not to be unexpected. So when they go to phase 3, that's our anticipation that we might start opening up then at the Council on Aging. But that may not be the case. I mean, we have to really evaluate what's going on at the time, and if there's still a concern, we have to err on the side of the safety of the people who use the facility and of staff. Well, a lot of our staff are also in that same category.
Go ahead.
This is Commissioner Culberson. I was just going to say I don't have an issue with waiting until the next quarterly regular date for Council on Aging. I know they got a lot going on, and I think we're going to see her anyway at budget hearing. But I did want to reiterate while we're talking about Council on Aging for everyone out there listening that the county commission is not trying to close the Council on Aging down.
What did you say?
I just want to reiterate to everybody listening that, again, that the county commission is not trying to close the Council on Aging department down.
Thank you, Commissioner Culbertson.
In fact, just the opposite. We're trying to, get them set up a better home and enhance their services. So it just keeps coming up. I bet I got 5 or 6 phone calls this week. Why are we trying to shut Council on Aging down? So I just want to make it perfectly clear, we are not trying to shut Council on Aging down.
On that note, Commissioner, since we have the Council on Aging quarterly report on the agenda, we have ordered replacement vehicles for numerous of their daily task vehicles, but we're also working on replacing one of their big transportation buses. We're working with Enterprise on that, and on 2 or 3 of the handicap accessible vans that they use for personal transportation as well. So just reiterate what you're saying is we are actually enhancing the services, not detracting from them.
Exactly.
The one
Thank you.
No, well said, Jeff. The one question I had was, the concern around volunteers, and knowing that a lot of those volunteers, no different than the conversations we've had around the election, fall into a category of more but at risk, either by age or otherwise. And so these numbers don't reflect that they've had the shortage that I thought at one time they were worried they may have. And so getting new vehicles and doing all those things to enhance services are great. I just was worried that we wouldn't be able to get to the people in need based on what was going on around the county. So
the Meals on Wheels they were able to continue, and some of the transportation. Originally we limited it to only medical necessity for the transportation. They expanded it on a limited basis to the homebound for they call it chores, I think, but it's like to go get groceries or to go, do some other things that aren't medically related, but still necessary for them to be able to maintain their livelihood or their lifestyle, I guess. So they've expanded it to that a little bit, and they continue to adapt it as they go. Obviously, it is still reduced a little because we don't want to put anybody in an at-risk position in a vehicle with a second person that they don't know. But they're doing a great job administering it, I believe.
yeah, and I don't know if there's a way we can help promote or advertise for those positions. I mean, there's lots of people that are still not working. My biggest fear with all of this is that private sector is very, very smart, and what they'll typically figure out how to do is do the same or more with less. And so when you have that many people out of your workforce, it's very likely that they may only bring back 50% or 80% of ultimately those they furloughed. I mean, that's a reality. And so trying to line up some of those resources when and if it makes sense to try to enhance what the Council on Aging is doing, it would then have to fall out of a volunteer to maybe there's some kind of compensation. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there as something we can think about. It's obviously a very valuable service. So
It is, we may have to hold a job fair in Leavenworth County. Typically, you can't get into the schools now for that. So, anyways, okay, then we're ready to move on to planning and zoning then. If everybody's okay with Council on Aging, wait until the next quarter because, like Commissioner Culverson said, we will be seeing Council on Aging and budget upcoming. So
works for me.
That's fine with me.
all right, thank you, and we're ready for Crystal. How are you today?
Well, Mr. Commissioner, how are you?
So far, so good.
Good morning again.
Good morning. All right. Bear with me. Those
Well,
phones
you've
are
bared
really
with us for the last 2 hours. So.
It's been a pleasure. Commissioners, obviously this is our second quarterly report. For the quarter, things went a little differently over the last couple of months than we would have anticipated. However, I would first like to commend my staff. Planning and zoning staff, I think, really stepped up. Melissa and Kyle helped out with the Council on Aging on Meals on Wheels for a couple of weeks while they had some staff out. Stephanie has been, I believe, an invaluable member of the health department over the last several weeks. Jared finished grad school during all of this, so we're very proud of him.
Hey, congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Jared.
So, like I said, I think that staff has just done a really great job. I made the mistake of sitting before you when all of this began and told you that we were kind of slow, and I was, we got paid back for that statement. We have issued a lot of building permits in the last 6 weeks. We've been very busy. Also, an unforeseen consequence of the stay-at-home order is that septic systems are being overrun.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle has been very busy. We've got a number of them out there. Digger Jim, I know, has said that he has crews working around the clock on trying to repair septic systems. So definitely an unforeseen circumstance, but it happened, and we're dealing with it.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. Like, generally speaking, you can come and have, an entire service done, and it's $100 or $200. And if you do that every couple, 2-3 years, that scenario would never occur.
It's just maintenance.
But it's just maintenance. But if you
Defer the maintenance.
defer, you get some real problems. That's unfortunate.
Kind of like when we defer maintenance on roads, huh?
There you go.
Yep. So
That makes a lot of sense. That's unfortunate.
yeah, but like I said, we're dealing with them, and Kyle's doing a really great job. We've also, as you know, we're working to determine a solution to the engineered septic system issue. We believe that we have come up with a solution. Kyle worked very closely with the state, also with surrounding counties. We have determined that commercial systems will always need to be engineered. That is a state requirement. However, there are a number of residential requirements where we were previously requiring an engineered system, which is expensive and takes a lot of time to get designed. Those can actually be, they can be designed systems. There are designers, they're not engineers, but they're designers. It's still a specialized system, however, it is more cost effective, and typically there's a quicker turnaround on those. So we've made a couple modifications where we've got those up and running now, so we're excited about that. Staff has, as you know, made a number of regulation updates over the last 6 or 7 months. Those have all been updated in our zoning and subdivision regulations. Those have been put on the website. They are up and ready to go for our next round of updates. One of which is that we're working with Public Works on a regulation update that would allow private roads, which is a request from this board, of course. I hope to have that forward or before you in a work session in early June. Mr. Knoll with Public Works has been very helpful in helping define regulations and such that we can put together. So we're excited to bring that forward. Staff has continued to have like active transportation committee meetings and such. Those have all been done via Zoom, obviously, but we've continued to meet on those, on the ones that are still meeting. A number of those have been canceled. The technical forecast meeting is on hiatus for a couple of years. That is one that has to do with the census, but we got that all wrapped up and such, so that was exciting that we could have that finished. As you might imagine, it was very exciting to sit and look at numbers every month. The comprehensive plan is in the final stages. They should have a final draft to me by June 1st. I will review that for any changes and edits that need to be made. I will get that back to them so that they can finalize the document, and then we will bring that before the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners for approval. My hope is that we can have that done by late spring, early summer. Like I said, that's my hope.
Now, I had a question on that one. My understanding was that the process was going to be that we were going to have a work session between them and the county commissioners, and then the final draft would then be put together to send to the planning commission. Is that your understanding?
Sure. So they had a number of questions about some of the staff or some of the county resident feedback. I sat down with Mr. Lawfrey. We went through those lists, and everything had already been addressed we've gone back to the previous work session, and all of their requested confirmation had already been addressed by this board.
Oh, so there won't be a need for that then?
I don't believe so. Of course, that's completely up to you, but we did feel that all of those things had already been addressed.
Okay.
So,
That was my understanding of how it was going to be handled.
Right, yeah.
But so the next thing will be you'll get the final draft, then it will go to the planning commission, they'll have a hearing.
Yep.
And then we'll get the final version, and we'll also have a hearing, and then it will be, okay, got it.
Public hearing with who knows how many, or social distancing. There'll be however many seats you have out there.
Will that require a public hearing on this here? I know it will for planning commission, but will it require one here?
It won't require a public
It may
hearing
not require a
here,
public hearing when it comes back to you.
but it will for
It will at the
planning.
planning commission level.
So that's going to be difficult.
So Olsen is actually, they have proposed being able to do that via Zoom conference. That's obviously something that we've talked quite a bit about. They have been doing that with some other municipalities that were in the same boat that we're in. They actually have a really big meeting coming up, I believe, next week, and they're going to see how that goes. And that may be an option going forward, but before we commit to that.
And
we're
that's past legal muster there, does it?
Commissioner, I'll check into it, but the parameters for what constitutes a public meeting are somewhat broad and do recognize that there are limitations as to what can be done. Specifically, for example, you're not required to provide seating for a limitless number of people. You're not required to provide speaking opportunities for each and every single person. I think as long as reasonable input from the public is allowed is the touchstone, and we can certainly work with Olsen. And the fact that they're doing this for other municipalities indicates that it passes muster for more than just this board.
Okay.
So what time frame would that be? Would that be the end of June you're looking at that, or?
End of June, perhaps early July.
Okay.
I'm hopeful, like I said, they should have the final document to me by June 1st. That should take about a week or so for me to go through, make sure that there aren't any glaring mistakes or anything. I'll get it back to them. They'll assemble everything for a final quality control. And then I think at that point is when we would want to schedule the public meeting, as opposed to trying to schedule it now and then hoping that we get everything done.
Yeah, and
that everything turns around really
the
quickly.
further down the road you get, like into July, and I would think then your social distance, I mean, it's going to be
Hopefully.
easier to do meetings probably.
That's our hope, for sure.
Well, okay. There you are. Glad to have full guy again.
Absolutely.
Don't think there'll be any air quality ozone alerts this year, do you? I mean, it seems like with traveling down and the gas tax down, we should have good clean
You
air
know, you
this summer.
hear about all these amazing things around the world. You know, water's clearing up and animals in certain areas that have never been there before. But I don't know about you guys. The Missouri and Kansas River look exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I mean, we need to do this for a lot
No.
longer.
No, we don't.
Just kidding.
No, we don't.
It's hard to tell. He's smiling under the mask.
I'm not sure that the color of those rivers has anything to do with the use of the river.
Understood.
I think it's the
The mud.
muddy.
Understood.
That's why they call it the big muddy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you said the septics, you were going to a design system instead of an engineered system?
In a number of circumstances, especially residential, on instances where maybe they have not the greatest soil or they have
Correct.
less than 2.5 acres, we can do a design system. Which, like I said, it's still, you still have to have a designer. It's not like figured
Well,
out.
but an engineered system is expensive. I agree with Commissioner Shipke when it comes to all this money shelled out before you get into your house. I'd rather see the money spent on square footage so we can collect the taxes on that instead of, we don't collect a whole lot of taxes on fees and additions, but
But you could build on, with the design system, it's probably going to allow it.
Higher density.
The 1 acre. I mean, is that typical, what's typical on those systems?
So then we kind of start to get into some muddy water there, if you will. It's going to
gray water.
Yeah, exactly.
Gray water.
It's going to depend on the soil type and such, and a designer may be able to do it, but they may not. They may say, hey, you're going to have an engineered system at that point. But
Okay.
it definitely will allow us with parcels that are less than 2.5 acres. I would be hesitant to say we get all the way down to 1 acre, and we're still okay, but under that 2.5 acre mark.
Right.
It just provides more capability, though.
Right.
Just do the common sense thing. Add 100-foot of lateral if it fails. Keeps failing, keep adding another 100-foot of lateral. You'll get it. So anyway, that's good.
Chris, you probably don't know off the top of your head. I was curious, building permits year-to-date versus 2019. Any idea where we're tracking, how far behind? I'm assuming we're behind, maybe not. But
I don't think we're that far behind. Like I said, we had about a 2 or 3 week kind of period where things were really, really quiet, and then they have picked back up very, very quickly. We're issuing building permits.
Interest rates have helped,
yeah.
or lack of interest rate, I guess.
But I can get that information for you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Just when we were talking about the septic, I was having a conversation, I think it was yesterday, with Steve Jack and the LCDC. And so, sometimes there's these development opportunities that come to the cities, and based on their requirements, the city doesn't feel like it's a good fit, right? Maybe it's because they're utilizing far too many acres for the number of jobs and what they believe that return on investment to be, and et cetera. And I'm like, well, some of these opportunities seem to be far better suited for the county because maybe they do have large acreage requirements and maybe they don't have a lot of staff, in which case some of the infrastructure requirements, I'm of the opinion in most cases you can get the water and power that you need in most cases. It usually comes down to sewer. And we have examples of plenty of businesses that can operate on septic. I mean, we've got one in the industrial park now. So I'm just curious what we could or should be doing there, this isn't necessarily a question just for you, the larger group, is to making sure that the collaboration, I don't know that when they kick an opportunity out at the city, they actually say, hey, maybe you're a good fit for the county. And what we might be able to do to help foster some of that, because I'd love to see those businesses, they're going to go somewhere. If we can get them in Leavenworth County, and it makes sense.
Yeah, water and power is probably not an issue. It's gas and sewer. It's getting gas to a lot of these places.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I
it
realize
is
the channels they
available.
use.
It is
Yeah.
available
Yeah.
in certain parts of the county, so you're absolutely right. If we could come up with something like that.
I
What
just
are you
see-
talking about? A business, a commercial business having their own lagoon?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Something like
it's a commercial business that because of, again, whatever type of business it is, or maybe storage or anything else, they run into these instances where they're taking up far too much area relative to the jobs they're producing, so the cities aren't necessarily supportive of them. I'm like, there's plenty of parcels that meet the requirements likely in the county. Like I said, the biggest difference I see is the lack of sewer, obviously. Maybe in some cases it's gas. But if they don't have so many people, this gets into some of the engineering
Yeah.
systems and everything else. I mean, if you got 20 people or 30 people or 40 people staff, that's probably not something that couldn't be solved for. And it doesn't have to be in the city, is my point. So,
Right.
So yesterday, or maybe the day before, Ms. Hack with LCDC reached out to my department and asked for a map showing parcels that were 10 acres or larger in size and were zoned either industrial or business. So hopefully that's a relationship.
that just happened?
Yeah.
Good.
Just
Maybe
a
that
couple
call
days ago.
was successful.
So we got that out to them. And they asked specifically about a couple of properties, but hopefully, that's a relationship that can continue, because we're certainly in that circumstance. All we got to do is talk about it, and I'm sure we can come up with a plan, but just having that open communication is what we need.
cool.
We're going to need all the help we can get to get through this.
See, if you don't mind, maybe just email us when you get a chance on just building permits. Just kind of curious how we stack up.
Yep, we'll do.
And would that be for the county and the cities, or just the county?
Just the county.
Just the
Just
county.
county, you don't
Yeah.
have the cities available, okay.
We can get the cities
We
through
can get it,
the
yeah.
appraiser.
Okay. Let's hope it keeps going. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions of Crystal?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Culberson. Crystal, wanted to get a conversation started about getting a process in place to get address signage placed on all rural properties. There's already a 1988 resolution that exists that every driveway in the county is supposed to be clearly marked with, I think, 2-inch numbers and letters on either the mailbox or some kind of permanent signage of some. And it just over the years, it's kind of fallen off. We got emergency responders left and right saying it's really hard to find a lot of these addresses. We did a project a couple years ago when we were doing driveway tubes, and we had the fieldwork staff that was doing that make a list of all the driveways and houses that didn't have addresses marked, and it was about half. So there's about 6,500 rural properties in the county. About 5,000 of those have houses on them or addresses. So about 2,500 of them are missing their address. So trying to get something started to where we can either send out a reminder notice to residents that they need to address their property. It's easy to find a house that's on fire, but if you're trying to find a heart attack victim at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's really hard to find if there's no address on 5 driveways. A lot of times if you're missing one, you can find one address and then just go backwards and forwards, to figure it out. But we're getting to a point now where half the addresses are missing. So you'll sometimes have 3 or 4 houses in a row that have no addresses on them. So it's getting really difficult to find places. So how can we go about, I think we've talked about sending out a letter to the 5,000 people saying, hey, if you don't already have your address marked, we need to figure out how how to get that done.
Yeah, we probably should have sent that out when we sent them envelopes out on the reappraisals.
Yeah, reappraisal notes, we talked about that too, just doubling up on the postage, stick it in with, the letters that are already going out, which, I mean, it's been since 1988 that this has been deteriorating, so it's not
Yeah, I remember the discussion in 1988 is Public Works, they were wanting Public Works to make all the address signs.
Yeah.
That didn't go nowhere.
No.
And it's too bad, I guess, we don't have a standard sign when you get your building permit. Here's your address, need to post it.
And so my initial thought is the first thing we can do is we can start to make sure to remind people as they get their building permit that they need to make sure that their address is clearly visible, which sure seems like a common sense thing to me, but make sure that it's visible. We could begin to have, when they do the entrance inspection, that their mailbox needs to be installed at that time also, and it needs to be there on the side of the mailbox. And then if we don't do a mailer, which we're certainly open to doing a mailer, that there's a fee associated with that, but I think we could do a big social media push. We could also have John with the Leavenworth Times write an article in the newspaper that says, hey, this is a problem that we're having. This is a reminder. Go to Home Depot, Lowe's, Bronus, get your 2-inch numbers and get them on your mailbox, sort of thing.
Are you required to have a mailbox?
No, that's where we have some of the issues. Some driveways, that's Commissioner Culberson again. Some of the driveways don't have mailboxes. They have the post office box, or the post office has instructed them to put their mailbox at the end of an intersection down the road from the property. So there's a lot of instances where there's no mailbox on the driveway, so then they're supposed to put up some kind of permanent sign.
So if it's not a mailbox, then at the entrance inspection time, it could be a mailbox
some other
or
marker.
Something, yes.
I think one of the challenges that we face is because we don't do inspections, nobody's back out there after the house actually gets built. And that's where you would normally put the address up, not when you put the tube in for all the contractors to be driving in and out and running over a sign that has your address on it. So that, I think that is one of the challenges that would be addressed. But I think you could make a standardized sign rule, but the problem right now is not that we don't have a rule in place, it's that there's no enforcement of it because we don't do code enforcement per se.
You'd think, though, you'd want the address posted when you're building, so materials being delivered.
Well, I think they do. It's usually on a
piece of
4x8 piece of plywood, and then it disappears.
On a 2x4 driven into the ground by the contractor.
Yeah.
Well, it sure wouldn't hurt when you're doing, it'd be easy.
Be an easy
to
public
give
notice.
information, and a reminder, and maybe even give them a copy of the resolution,
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Yep. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions of Crystal?
Where are we at on the building codes committee, or has that just been put on hold with the COVID-19 and all this situation?
Yeah, so I brought the recommendation forward, I guess that would have been in March at this point, and we had talked about maybe having the committee reconvene to further the recommendation, if you will. We obviously haven't had anybody in the courthouse. I am happy to move forward on that at the direction of the board.
Be a good Zoom meeting.
Yeah, we could do
Or you can wait till July.
July's going to be awfully busy.
That's true. We're going to have a lot of stuff going on in July.
June and July is going to be busy, but we'll get through it.
But yeah, if that is the direction that the board would like us to go to, then that's definitely the direction that we'll head in.
I think the last discussion was that go back to that committee with we want some type of codes.
Yeah.
So not the enforcement is not what they're discussing. It's if we had them, what would you want?
Yeah.
And I believe it was, discussion was more toward commercial buildings that occupy several hundred people in them, but that's probably not going to happen for a while. Like wedding venues, stuff like that, I believe is where we were going with that. But I don't know what really the consensus of the board was on that. So,
Yeah.
till we really decide what we want them to talk about, do we really want them to meet?
I thought that we had,
I thought it was more toward the commercial building part.
well, I mean, I guess it sounds like we need to have another discussion, because I thought we had said we weren't going to have a punitive enforcement mechanism, but
But
we,
it's, well, yeah, but standard, yeah.
But
You
even
have
for-
Yeah, I
codes
think
that
the
define-
idea was to have a standard, and it's, whether you want to call it recommended, I mean, there is a standard, but enforcement upon commercial because of the risk to the public.
Yeah.
is that how you recall it,
Yeah.
Mark?
So codes, in general, that this committee would go in and make a recommendation on what form or what codes that they would recommend that we require. There would be actual inspections on commercial. On residential, it would just be, it's a requirement, but we're not going to go out and do inspections throughout.
You're signing that you're building to Glover County Code.
Yep.
Whether it be 2012, 2018,
Whatever that committee
whatever.
would then recommend. So we can do that.
Okay.
Get that. Zoom would probably work for that, or go to meeting or whatever.
And then what was the other caveats? It was like it had to be new, and then it also had to be greater than 50% of the,
Yeah, it's not just a remodel. It's if your house is demolished by greater than 50%, then you
or
have
an addition that's greater than 50%.
You have to bring it back up to code. Yeah.
That seems like that's been a long time ago.
Well, I don't think there actually was a consensus that happened during that meeting.
I feel like we were maybe 4 out of 5.
Maybe.
Yeah. It was 4 out of 5.
I won't name any names.
I won't either. Okay. Any other questions, Crystal? Well, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. I know you've been shorthanded and everything else, so very well
I
done.
know.
Thanks, Crystal.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Do you know how long your staff member is going to be on loan?
I do not know. She
Okay.
has been spending more and more time in the planning and zoning department.
Okay,
so
I understand. Well,
Do whatever we need to do.
that's right.
Yep.
Glad we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Now, we're ready for discussion of Tongi Business Park balance of funds.
Commissioners, you have an agreement with the city of Tonganoxie from April of 2017. We provided funding for their industrial park. There are some certain requirements within that agreement, one being at the end of the project, remaining funds are to be returned to the county. They have reached the point where the project is substantially complete and the funds should be returned. However, they are requesting that the county consider allowing them to use those funds for other expenditures that weren't initially, contemplated in the agreement. You have a letter requesting a joint work session from the mayor of Tonganoxie, and that's really the topic for today is, do you want to schedule that work session? If so, what might that look like? Would you all be okay with a virtual work session versus trying to get it? Because if we need to have everybody in this room, obviously, that's going to have to wait until we get to phase 3 where we're allowed to have more people in here.
I think what I understood from the city was they might just send like their county administrator and one
The mayor,
council.
the mayor,
The
the
mayor
city
or
administrator, council member.
or council member. Is that, Rocky, what you were thinking?
Sorry to put you on the spot, Mr. Hempel, but
We appreciate it, too.
I appreciate that.
Morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I think what the City of Tonganoxie would like to meet with the County Commission to decide possibly, it's my understanding the agreement only covers the 4 corners boundary lines. We still have an interceptor sewer put in, and we'd like to at least meet with commissioners and have commissioners meet with the city. Now, whether it's a fact that the commissioners form a committee of, say, a couple commissioners, legal counsel, and Mark, and the city do the same, rather than everybody meet and kind of come to a conclusion or talk about it and then bring it forth to the commission. It's a good opportunity now for economic development. I mean, all we lack is sewer, more shovel ready.
Right. And like I said, we just got to work out the details on the contract the way it was originally written up.
And it very well may take a new contract.
And that's where, I think that's where we'd have to head. We'd have to do a new contract, possibly return the funds, do a new contract, and do it that way, just to follow the letter of the law on our contract.
I feel that the city did an excellent job in management of the funds.
I do too.
I got some competitive bids. George and Dan Porter did an excellent job administration-wise as far as those funds. And we'd like to get this thing shovel-ready and ready to go.
Yeah, and I do need to recognize the city for doing a good job of being a good steward of the money, and you didn't, overspend on this project.
One of the things to consider not only will help the development of that business park, it'll also, by running that sewer, which we've already bought the easements for, and we spent considerable cost already getting them designed and ready to go.
Is it ready to bid?
Yeah, it will also open up more area between the business park and the southern part of Tonganoxie to development.
Is the sewer designed and it could go for bid?
I believe it's ready to go.
Okay.
George is on the phone, would like to, if he's allowed to chime in, he'd like to chime in.
Is he on?
Is he on
right now?
Well, all we got to do is buzz him in,
call
he's
him.
waiting.
Okay.
Did we want to do that now, or just
schedule
want
a
to
work session?
Or do you want to schedule a work session first?
This is what I'm asking you all.
I would just,
What do you want to do, Mark?
If you are,
I would like to have a work session.
if you're amicable to a work session to
Sure.
discuss a new agreement, then that's what we need to do. If you want to enforce the current agreement, then we need that direction, whatever you want to do. I mean, that's what they're asking is, will you consider a work session? I personally don't think that having a small group of 2 commissioners work something out with staff, I believe it would be better to have that discussion with the full board in a public meeting. The challenge with negotiating with just 2 commissioners is obviously it's 2 commissioners. We can't find the rest of the board. We could come up with the greatest plan ever, walk back to the board and say,
And Mike hates it.
the other 3 don't like it. So I don't think there would be anything that we couldn't discuss in public, I guess is what I'm saying. And if we could just schedule, if they wanted to send a couple of people up here on their behalf to do that, that's awesome. We could do that. And we could have it during one of our regular meetings, just schedule a work session. Or if they wanted to do some kind of a Zoom meeting with their entire board, then that would have to require a little bit more coordination, obviously.
Well, I'll move that we have a work session with the Tonganoxie City Council, and the logistics will be established by the county administrator. He'll figure out how the meeting's going to be conducted.
He'll discuss it with city administrator.
Right.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the work session with the city of Tonganoxie? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cog votes aye.
Commissioner Culberson votes aye.
Rocky, if
Thank
we
you.
could, or Mark, in preparation of that work session, I don't know what all would be provided ahead of time, but I'd like to see just some additional detail as to all cost to date, those additional anticipated costs. Because I don't, and I don't know that I'm just not reading it correctly, but obviously there's a projected total. There's obviously the existing balance, but understanding what total's been outlaid thus far.
We can provide that for the
And just,
commission.
yeah, I mean, it's got to be there.
In fact,
I just-
I believe it's already ready.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Tonganoxie has been providing a monthly or so update when there's projects going on. I don't think we get it every month if there's not any change, but they've been providing a monthly update that shows what they've expended to date, what was left, and that's where we're at now, is pretty much they're done with that phase of the project.
This is Commissioner Cos. I'd also like to be provided with a kind of like a cost of completion for what it would cost to run the sewer line and any outstanding other than what they're asking the county for, where within the budget for Tonganoxie is it?
We can more than provide that for you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
And this is Commissioner Culberson. I was just going to bring up that this might be a good opportunity to explore the County Road 30 project that would also benefit Tonganoxie, being a county project, but since these funds were earmarked for Tonganoxie, this might be a good opportunity to add that into the work session.
Okay.
Agreed.
Maybe the sewer will come in.
Commissioner Cos, I agree.
Sewer will come in a lot less, and we'll have some money left over or something. But anyway,
We will take a look at that also.
any other
Mr.
questions? Mr. Hempelwise here?
Hopefully we can fill up that industrial park.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Be a
Yeah,
good
the
problem to
location.
have. Okay.
Like I said, full.
All right. So did we voted on that, so we're good to go. Is there anything else for the board at this time? Anybody got anything they're going to?
Well, I can
I can't
report
agree.
that I attended, this is Commissioner Cos, the governor's conference call last Thursday,
Thanks, Rocky.
where we did get a very short advance notice that 1.5 would be coming, being announced that afternoon. And then I attended the fire board, the trustees meeting on Monday night, and all seemed to go well with that. And then I attended yesterday the web design selection committee meeting, and we narrowed down to getting additional information from 3 of the people who had submitted requests.
Okay.
I did have one thing to bring to everyone's attention. I think probably people know, but Senator Braun was able to insert Senate Bill 242 into the omnibus tax bill that is going to be considered this Thursday, and if it passes in the Senate, it will move over to the House in the afternoon, and perhaps we'll get our folks down in southern Leavenworth County that were affected by the tornado the ability for us to abate their taxes on.
Buildings that they don't have anymore?
Right.
Wow.
What a concept.
So that is in process.
I hope it goes, like you said,
So are they all working again? Or did
Just
any of them
one-day session, I guess.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if any of them got furloughed.
I would assume they're essential.
Yeah.
Must be.
Let's hope it gets passed.
Yeah,
That's just a common sense, right thing to do.
It really is.
So,
We really need everybody, both parties, everybody. This should not be a partisan issue. It should be everybody on board.
If you can't agree to not have to pay tax on property you no
that
longer
you
own,
can't use.
then I'd like to meet with you personally.
We'll send them to you.
Yeah.
That's fair. I'll give you my cell phone.
Do we need to put this on the agenda about the renaming of a tributary of Wolf Creek?
Go ahead.
If you'd like to, Commissioner. It's an unnamed, generally defined tributary to Wolf Creek, not Wolf.
Oh, it's to Wolf Creek, okay.
Yes.
No con, how do you say it?
Nikon, Hecon.
Nikon, Hecon.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Culberson. I checked on that Beverly branch, and I couldn't find that it's ever been named under USGS or the Corps or anybody. So it's not the main creek
It's
itself.
just a tribute to going to Wolf Creek.
Yep.
So would that be a resolution that would come?
Well, I guess one concern, I don't know, concern issue that may be is that the name is coming from an individual that I mean, we have no affiliation with. I don't think that it requires our approval in any way, shape, or form, and that, I don't know the history of the Indian
Okay.
tribe that they're referring to, so I don't know that we need to, I don't know that this is an action that the board even needs to
Yeah.
take. It
We
will
can't
happen
read
with or
it.
without us, and being involved with it, I think it does expose us a little bit to some criticism we could probably avoid.
This is Commissioner Culberson. That's what I was going to bring up too. Is I know we've got a process for naming like assets and structures like bridges, but this is kind of a different situation, so I didn't know how involved we needed to be.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Culberson, this is David Van Paris, and I apologize for having to ask you this session. Concern I had was if, and based upon your prior experience as GIS director, if it is a named tributary, does that imply greater scrutiny either by the Corps of Engineers or Environmental Protection Agency or State Historical Society or the State Archaeological Board with respect to scrutiny of any development along or in that vicinity?
I'm going to get.
I haven't seen it affect any kind of riparian rights or anything like that
Okay.
in the past.
Okay.
It basically boils down to whether it's navigable or non-navigable streams, and since it's non-navigable, the rules are pretty gray.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. All right, then we'll just,
I can respond to the individual that we have no interest in providing a letter of support or being in opposition one way or the other.
okay.
A little bit unrelated, but as we're talking about natural disasters and hopefully this bill that passes, we start talking about tributaries. Have we had any more discussion or dialogue when we think about, some of the levees and obviously with the Corps and challenges? And I mean, while it's been relatively dry compared to the forecast lately, I think they've been calling for rain every day for 2 weeks, and I haven't seen much of any. But and that's okay necessarily. I'm just thinking about we were coming into this year already at much higher pool and floodplain forecast up north. What, if anything, can we be doing, should we be doing, or is the answer we can do nothing and just have to wait?
On the Corps?
Well, I'm just thinking about all the levees that have failed. Obviously, there's been no repair to those levees, and what, we need to do in working with Fort Leavenworth or any other entities to try to, I guess, better understand the plan or how we're going to address it, or there is nothing we can do.
Commissioner Shemke, David Van Paris, the levee along Fort Leavenworth is maintained by the Department of the Army and Corps of Engineers, and we have no jurisdiction over that. Leavenworth County is the official sponsor of a levee system that extends north from Fort Leavenworth into Atchison County. The county did have communications with the Corps of Engineers last spring as a result of the flooding and the, quite frankly, destruction of a significant portion of that levee system. Corps of Engineers discussed possible repairs. We've heard nothing further on that topic. The Corps initially had indicated that they would not object to the farmers who were affected by those levees to rebuild it themselves, which I found to be rather unusual. To my knowledge, no effort has been made by the Corps or allocation of funds for the repairs of those levees.
So do we write a letter?
Yeah,
what do we do?
Well,
We've been writing a lot of those lately.
but does any of this fall under the FEMA funding, or is this just going to be from the Corps funding?
It's all Corps, is my understanding. It's their levy, only they are allowed to work on it, and they have to provide the funding.
Maybe it's a good time to ask. The state just came into a considerable amount of money that's supposed to be allocated to counties in need. Wonder what they do with it.
Well, that would be state, it's federal funds
That's
passed
federal.
through the state.
Right.
Be a little different, but yeah, I find it interesting that the federal government is talking about more stimulus money that could come directly to the local municipalities when we haven't even gotten our first amount of money. The state's still holding it. I think if they would just release the restrictions on the money they've already provided, to the state for us, they probably wouldn't need to provide another stimulus
You know what?
package.
That is crazy. Almost as crazy as business owners opening, getting arrested, and us releasing inmates so they don't get COVID. I find that also
That's-
crazy.
That's crazy too.
It's not a perfect rule.
Really crazy.
That's
Yeah.
really crazy.
Hey, I do have a question on that, is last meeting we asked whether we knew who the people were that were on the committee that was going to determine the distribution of those funds, and we wanted to have a seat at the table or at least have some input. Did you find anything out on that?
This is Commissioner Cos. The request has been made to the governor's office to represent Leavenworth County to be placed on the committee. There just hasn't been a response at this point.
Okay, do we know how many are on the committee and who some of those members are?
I do not believe that all of the committee members have been named, is my understanding, but there will be 15 individuals on the committee.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, anything else?
And I do want to, there have been obviously a number of local, state, and legislature representatives that are trying to get us those answers too. So David French, I know, being one, and Senator Holland has kept us surprised, and I'm sure Braun as well. So anything they can find out and share with us is appreciated. Whether they can influence it or not, I don't know. But information is always helpful.
Yeah. Did anyone attend the farmer's market last weekend?
No, but I heard it did go well.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I didn't make it.
It went quite well. So they weren't looking for a new location.
This is Commissioner Cos. The farmers market will be open to foot traffic this weekend.
Okay, it won't be drive-through? Okay, that sounds good.
Not drive-through.
All right, and let's see, that Baser's got a meeting on a public hearing next week on some industrial revenue bonds. And Tongi had one last week, didn't they?
I
Didn't make it?
didn't attend.
Okay. So, that's about all I got going on. There's a work session tonight, I believe, Baser. Anybody else have anything before we adjourn? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Voting.
Aye.
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 Cos, votes aye.